And we're back. Yes, people, welcome back to the Backpacking Cycle. It's been 8 months since I last did an episode, so I'd just like to say thank you to anyone who's continued to listen. I think we got 62 downloads last week, which is crazy since I haven't posted an episode in 8 months. But yeah, it's been an interesting 8 months. I've really evolved in some ways and stagnated in others, but I've learned a lot, and I think I've really developed a deeper understanding of who I am and what I want to achieve in this world. And yeah, I opened myself up to feeling a lot more instead of thinking more. And I'd probably say I've stopped thinking as much, which is, I suppose, is a good thing. And I'm actually being open to the world and feeling more, which it's got its own challenges. It's difficult. It feels unnatural for me, but in terms of the development that you get from this, it is the real work. It's very easy for me to sit at home and intellectualize and just lock myself in my room and just read books, which I've still been reading plenty, and I've got a lot of stuff I want to share. But it's very easy for me to shy away from the world and just live up in this narrative or this mythopoetic, I don't know, framework in my mind. But to actually live in the world and to be open to feeling things with your heart and actually be open to being vulnerable and yeah, just tackling the things that need to be tackled. But yeah, it's difficult, but it's where the real work happens. So yeah, it's been an interesting 8 months, and I suppose I feel not inclined, but I feel ready to start posting on the podcast again. So I would just like to say appreciation to anyone who's continued listening and you could probably tell as well, boys, I haven't done a podcast in a while because I keep stuttering and not speaking really quick, so you're gonna have to bear with me. It might take me a couple episodes to get back in my mojo. But yeah, thank you very much, people, and let's get straight into it. So in today's episode, I want to talk about dissociation. And if you don't know what dissociation is, it's this dissociation can be categorized as this feeling of not being real, of kind of not feeling like you're in your body, not feeling like where your feet are on the ground that you're there. And there seems to be this common tendency and this common experience from people that they live up in a narrative in their mind. We're this spectrum of consciousness that sits behind our eyes, somewhere in the middle of our head, and it's this constant bombardment of thought that's going on, and we're kind of floating up in the air. And when we're walking, we don't feel like we're walking. We forget that we have legs that are hitting the ground and these feet that are touching the ground every time we take a step, and we've got arms that move and pick up things. We don't feel things. It's these things, our body's just something that's working through the will of our mind. And this was something I experienced extreme amounts of when I had social anxiety. I didn't know this when it was happening because I didn't have the therapeutic intellectual understanding of what dissociation was. But now when I come from a different perspective of more development and understanding, I understand now that I was deeply, deeply dissociated. And anyone who's experiencing deep mental health issues, whether that be social anxiety, whether that be depression, whether you're stuck in, ruts, or you're just not feeling confident about yourself, there is forms of dissociation going on. You're not existing in your body. And this still happens to me now, and it happens even with simple habits of going on your phone, eating junk food, whatever it might be, whatever the bad habit or whatever the self-destructive habits that are happening or the self-destructive nature. It's a form of dissociation. It's trying to get away from the feeling in your body and to please the narrative in your mind, to please the ego. Because the ego just wants the understanding of your ego, the conceptualization of it, just wants to survive. It just wants to reinforce this idea of who it is. And when you feel things with the body keeps a score, as that famous trauma book says. The body has all the energy that you've accumulated through your whole life, through every experience, the actual feelings of your experiences, not the interpretation of it. They accumulate in your body and they get held onto. And so if your ego's got an idea of who it is, maybe I'm Alex Rogers and I act like this in a certain situation, and I perceive myself people don't like me, or I'm very confident in this situation, but you get a different energetic response in your body. There's a discrepancy between them. And so to feel the emotions in the body goes against the ideas and the narratives of the ego, of who you are. But the true nature of who we are is in the body. The ego, don't forget, is a conception. It's a conceptualization. It's a mental construction in our mind, a very important and a healthy one. Like, the ego is not a bad thing. It's crucial. Like, we wouldn't be alive without an ego. But we are also the body as well. And the ego kind of needs to be integrated into the body. And the problem with living in this society where, I don't know, we live in a very materialistic, capitalistic world where, like, people are very suppressed and not emotionally intelligent or not spiritually in touch with the divine, or don't actually understand and build awareness of who they are. The problem with this is we get brought up into this world, and we kind of get trained subconsciously to, like, dissociate away from our bodies and to intellectualize in our mind. And this then compounds and grows over generations and generations, and it's becoming now, as you're seeing with the mental health crisis, mental health is getting worse and worse and worse. Addictions are getting worse and worse and worse. Self-destructive habits getting worse and worse and worse. People's mental health, depression, anxiety, worse and worse and worse. And that's because we are forgetting that we are a body in the material world. We're attaching to a narrative in our minds. We're getting so dissociated that we forget who we are. Our ego is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And the ego does this for good reason. It suppresses the body's sensations for a really important reason. It's to protect the core of who we are. So, for example, let's say when we're growing up, say if we're going through, I don't know, like, we're a child and our parents have this subtle behavior of not paying full attention to us. Like, they're a bit resentful of us. Like, we're taking up a lot of their time and they've not achieved what they wanted to achieve in their life, and they're anxious themselves, they're depressed themselves. We forget that our parents are human beings. The psychological problems that we have, our parents suffer with similar things. And so what we need when we're growing up, when we're a child, when we're a baby, is we need, like, authentic empathy. We need to be looked at for who we are. But when our parents haven't dealt with their trauma, when they haven't understood, and they're never going to do this perfectly, but because we live in a society of everyone's being suppressed, our parents are looking at us through the lens of their ego, and they're very suppressed and anxious themselves, right? And not everyone. And my parents were very good. Like, they tried their best. They were amazing people, but they've got their own issues, and they didn't get the psychological development that I got. They didn't get the loving, caring home that I got. They didn't get the understanding of psychological issues. And so your parents look at you through the lens of their own insecurities and their own anxieties, and they project them onto you. So when you act out in certain ways, they can't look at you for authentically being you. They can only look at you through the lens of their own judgments. And what this creates on a very subtle level is this energetic feeling of you don't actually exist as who you are, and your ego feels like it's kind of being annihilated because you don't actually exist as who you are, because your parents look at you and, like, when you do things, and they want you to be a certain person, they want you to behave in a certain way, they don't want you to be you, they want you to be their projection, their idea of who you are. So then you don't feel like you actually exist. So you create this persona, you create this narrative, you create responses of how to actually fit into their idea of who they want you to be. And then so it creates layers and layers and layers over the authentic you. You start creating layers and layers and layers. And this is how you feel dissociated, because the feelings in your body, the feelings to act out the energy of who you actually are, you realize that in the world isn't accepted. Your parents don't accept you, and the people around you, the society around you, didn't accept you for who you actually were. So you started creating personas and characters and narratives and ideas and behaviors around who you should act like. And this takes you further and further away from the core of who you are. And the core of who you are is the energy in your body. And so this then creates a really strong feeling and perception of a narrative in our mind, and we start living up further and further in this idea of who we are. And so then it then evolves into this feeling of dissociation. So, like, when you get anxiety, for example, let's really try and envision what dissociation feels like. Let's really think about someone that makes you anxious. Like, picture it now. You walk past someone Or let's think of times when you're depressed or like you're nervous or something where you just had enough. Like maybe you go to work and you just had a long day and you get home and all you want to do is binge eat, or you want to just scroll through your phone, or you want to go out and drink a few pints, or you walk past someone in work and they elicit that feeling of social anxiety. What happens? You can feel the sensations in your body, but you start finding that your mind goes into overdrive, that it starts coming up with thoughts, perceptions. Oh, this person thinks like this and that and that and that. And you start getting this overdrive, that heaviness, this like headache feeling in your mind. And it's an overdrive of thoughts. It's the attachment to the narration in your mind. And by really, that then creates this feeling of getting taken away from your body, and you don't feel real. You don't feel like you're on the ground. You actually forget that you've got legs and your feet exist because you become so attached to the narration in your mind. And the actual wisdom sits in the body. Because as I said before, like I don't know if I did mention this before, I tried recording this podcast about 15 times, so I'm a little bit muddled and confused. But the body keeps a score. So if you've ever heard of that really like famous trauma book, like the body does keep the score. So as we go through life and we experience the ups and downs and the micro traumas and maybe the big traumas that we get, our body holds onto that energetic response. It holds onto the energy that we deal with. And if we don't feel that energy, if we don't feel our body, the mind creates narratives around this energy and suppresses them deeper into our body. They hold in our muscles, they hold in our joints, they hold in the depths of our mind. Like all this energy doesn't get released, it just gets suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And when things get suppressed so much, when our body gets suppressed, the energy starts, like it gets in this really tight ball. And because it can't do what it naturally wants to do, which is like emerge into sensation, emerge into consciousness, and then dissipate, because everything in reality is changing, it's flux. Because it can't allow to have the nature of flux, it concretizes and it builds up and it gets really tight, and then it starts spilling here and there. It starts spilling out of this tightness of this ball. And then that's why anxiety comes up, depression comes up, because it's just this energy spilling out everywhere. And you've got this overflux of energy, this tightness, this heaviness that it's having to come out, and the energy that's coming out is like depressed, it's repressed energy. So when you learn to feel the body, feel the sensations, when you develop in a sense where you're not constantly attached to the narration in your mind, and you actually start feeling like, wow, my feet are on the floor, I've got hands, I move through the material world, you start letting the body, the energy of the body, the sensations play out their natural course. And because they've been repressed for so long, they start letting go of the repressed energy, which comes in the form of like, wow, I'm feeling really depressed, but I'm feeling it in my body now. And when you start doing this, when you actually start feeling in your body instead of trying to cognitively understand things, this energy will have to come out and it will move through your body, and it will actually it will go. But it will take time because you've got so much repressed energy. And this is how you overcome psychological issues. It's through tapping into the body just as much as it is understanding and conceptualizing where this depression came from. So let's use depression, for example, right? If you're like stuck in these depressive ruts, or if you've got anxiety and you're constantly in this perpetual state of anxiety, by feeling the sensations in your body, by feeling the increased heart rate, by feeling the tightness in your shoulders, by feeling this burst of energy, you're going to let the energy come and go. And it's going to keep coming and keep going. And the more open you are to feeling the energy, the more it's going to keep coming and keep going. And you're going to work through that energy. But if you're in your mind's like, oh, I refuse to be anxious, I hate being anxious, I hate the fact that I'm anxious, what happens to that energy? You don't let it come out. You don't let it burst and emerge into consciousness. You just keep suppressing it and keep suppressing it. And that's why you get stuck in the ruts. That's why you get stuck in the habitual nature of being depressed or anxious. It's because you're not feeling what needs to be felt. And I wish someone told me this when I was socially anxious, because like I used to try and understand it, and this is important because the cognitive side of things is important. This is where CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, comes in. It's understanding how the thought process works. But what we don't realize is like the thought process emerges from the body. And if we've got sensations of depression and we're not feeling them in our body, there's constantly going to be depressive thoughts emerging out of this energy. And if we're constantly just trying to change the way our cognition thinks, then we're not dealing with the core problem, that the depression, that the thoughts are merging out of the energy that's in our body. So when I was socially anxious, if I stopped spending so much time trying to cognitively understand how I interpreted that situation growing up, why I get anxious around that woman or anxious around that person, why that, if I try to stop understanding why, and I actually just shut off the cognition for a little bit and felt the body, I would let the depression emerge from my body, feel it, maybe actually let myself be depressed, and then it would move out of the way and I can move from a lighter place. It's paradoxical because like actually feeling the sensations of depression, anxiety makes you more anxious. It makes you more depressed. But once you feel it, once you become more anxious, more depressed, and you let that happen and you accept it, you accept what it feels like, that depression in your body or that anxiety in your body, it comes, the heaviness will overtake you. You'll be like, oh my God, this is what I feel like. This is who I am. And then it dissipate. And that energy would have left you then. You've got a more compassion and self-empathy, and you've got more energy. You've got more positive energy, but it's just feeling the sensations of the things. And there's a really interesting quote by Alexander Lowen, the guy who created bioenergetics, which is like a psychosomatic therapeutic way of like dealing with trauma through the body. He said, if being tired equates to giving up the struggle, then this is a sign of progress. And so what a common theme of my last 8 months has been is I've been like more tired than usual. Like I've had less energy. I've actually been getting ill more. Like I've actually been getting illness more. And this has been a good thing because I've been letting go of some of the trauma in my mind. Instead of suppressing so much of the trauma, I've actually been feeling depressed. I let myself feel anxious, and I'll spend a day where I'm just like, oh, I feel depressed. I hate myself. I'm like, it feels like I hate myself, but I'm like, okay, this is the energy that I'm suppressing in my body. Like, let's feel it. And I feel that. And the day after or weeks after, I'm like, oh, I feel so much lighter. Like I feel better. I feel like I can move from a place of abundance instead of suppression. And this like perpetual state of suppression is what's keeping you stuck in these ruts. You can only do so much with the mind. You can't think your way out of a thinking problem, and the thoughts emerge from the energetic response in the body. So you need to get into the body. And one thing I can say is, like the last couple months, I have felt more in my body. I feel like my feet hit the ground more. Like I feel like I'm like not up in a bubble in my mind as much. Like I actually am in my body, and I still get the dissociative feelings of being in a narration in my mind. But as I'm training to do this more, to be more aware, to be more open to feeling the body, I do feel like I belong in this reality more. I don't feel as dissociated. And it comes with a more confidence. It comes with a more authentic response to the world. You're not thinking as much. You're just kind of acting what is authentically you, which is priceless. It's the important work that needs to be done. But sometimes it comes at the cost that chasing material pursuits. Sometimes it comes at the cost that like giving up on these goals and these hopes and the desires that you've got, because they're coming from a suppressed narrative in your mind. It might be that the true authentic you needs to feel depressed right now. It needs to feel anxious. You need to have times of not making as much progress in the world materially. Like you might have to spiritually and psychologically feel what you need to feel to move forward into the world. And it's like if you don't feel your bodily sensations, if you don't really feel embodied, you're going to be smashing up against a wall. There's a wall there and you're just constantly punching up against it and you can't seem to make any progress. And until you feel what it's like, what that wall is made of, then it won't move. But when you feel what that wall is made of, what is that wall? How does it feel? What are the sensations in that wall? It gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and you can punch straight through it, and then you can move into a new feeling, a sensation, a new way of being. And so how do you do this? How do you start feeling more in your body? What are like the actual practical tips of to like feel like you exist more, you're not in a narration in your mind? The practical tips are, firstly, I would say, is to make sure you're exercising. Like anything that puts you into your body is going to benefit you in ways I can't even describe. And this is how the gym changes people's lives. This is how just daily walks, just movement changes people's lives, because energy is constantly moving. We are just a natural flow of energy. And when we're constantly stuck and we're being still all the time, energy is not having a way to progress through us. But that energy that's emerging in you, when you can move through your body, it's got chances to come in and out. And so anything that puts you into your body more is going to be good. So go to the gym, lift some weights, go out into the world and move, do some mobility training, actually learn how to sit in a squat position, how to actually move like a human. And once you can start moving, it's going to take so much of the narration in your mind away, and it's going to put you into the body where you can actually feel the energetic response, and you can lift the energy out of you. You can lift the depression out of you. You can walk the depression out of you by just taking a step, by moving. I don't know, whatever your body needs to do, just do it. Like go and exercise, because exercise takes you away from the narration and puts you into the body. And when you're in the body, that energy can then find its way out, because you're feeling it. You're feeling what it's like to move your body, and it can come out of you, and it can get its expression through exercise. So you can literally lift your way out of depression. You can exercise your way out of depression. But on the other side, when I say exercise, you need to also be willing to experience the sensations of the body, like feel the sensations of the body. As there is no solution without awareness. And becoming aware of how it feels to be you is the number one thing that's going to benefit you. So like exercise and move, that's the easiest, like most practical tip I can tell you now. But the real deep kind of way to stop being so dissociated and to feel like you exist more is to accept how you feel, and is to sit there and be willing to take a deep breath and go, right, I'm going to feel my stomach now. Like, I'm going to feel my heart. I'm going to feel my shoulders. Like, why do my shoulders feel so heavy? And like, don't try and conceptualize why all the time. Just like, my shoulders feel heavy. My arms don't feel like they're mine. What do my arms feel like? What do my legs feel like? And so any sort of meditation or mindfulness activities where you can feel like you're in your body are super important for this. And like yoga and obviously exercise is going to help you feel like this as well, because you're going to like move in your body. But really focus on the sensations of the body. And the more you can focus on the sensations, the more the energy is going to actually, like, when you put your conscious will on things, like you put your conscious will on the sensations of your body, it works through the trauma. And then you'll start understanding, like, this happened in Vipassana when I was doing the meditation retreat, right? So I'm sat there for 10 days in a meditation retreat, and they teach you Vipassana, which is, it derives from the Buddha, and it's a form of meditation where they get you to scan the body. So you start from the top of your head, and you move all the way down with your locus of attention from the head into the body, into the shoulders, into the neck, into the back of the head, into the arms, and then into the chest, into the back, into the legs, blah, blah, blah. And you work your way down, and you really focus on every part of your body and try and feel the sensations of what your finger feels like. And when you do this, and when your attention gets real sharp, or you start practicing it, you start noticing that, like, oh, that heavy feeling in my hand, or that like annoying, irritated feeling in my wrist. When I really feel like that, and it feels heavy and it feels tingly, I notice that I get anxious thoughts, and I start thinking about certain situations in my life. And you're like, wow, that's interesting. Like, my body actually holds on to thoughts and memories and experiences from my life. And by feeling that energy, I've let that thought, I've let that image emerge from the sensations in my body, come to my mind and dissipate and go, and I've let go of it. And now I feel lighter. And that's the whole process of coming into the body. It's feeling the sensations of the body. It's feeling the impulses. It's feeling the heaviness or the injuries or whatever it is, the tightness. It's feeling that, letting the thoughts and letting the feelings emerge from that sensation and let it go. And watch it with compassion, with equanimity. Don't try to judge it. Just experience that for what it is. And I really like the idea of like thoughts and feelings and emotions emerge from the sensations in the body. They kind of rise up into consciousness. And on a deep level, we know everything we need to do. It's sitting in our body. We just need to be willing to feel it. So yeah, like mindfulness, this is what bioenergetics is by Alexander Lowen. I'd recommend you read a book called The Betrayal of the Body by Alexander Lowen. It is quite a, to be honest with you, it's quite an advanced book. Like I feel like if you're getting into trauma psychology, if you're getting into like kind of like depth psychology, or if you really want to like get on a deeper level of like self-improvement, which is better than the surface level advice, read the Body Keeps the Score first by, I can't remember, it's a really famous trauma book. And then as soon as you've read that, start reading rather The Unspoken Voice by Peter Levine, or I might have it here, Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. This is about somatic inquiry. It's about how our body holds on to trauma. Or read Alexander Lowen, The Betrayal of the Body. And this is really interesting. In this book, let me just take a sip of water. In this book, The Waking the Tiger, he starts talking about how trauma actually develops and it grows. And so he uses the analogy of, I don't know why I'm still holding the book up, but yeah, get that book because it's amazing. And Peter Levine's amazing. He's done a lot of work with Gabor Mate, which is like the most famous trauma psychology guy at the moment. And you can read his book, The Myth of Normal, which is really interesting as well. But yeah, he starts talking about in his book how like trauma first emerges. And what he says is like, if you look at a wild animal, so say there's a gazelle out in the savannas of Africa, and you'll notice as he's walking around and he hears a noise, he hears a rattling in the bush, and he freezes. Like the first thing they do is freeze, and they stay perfectly still. And the fight or flight response in their body has emerged. It's started, it's kicked in. Their cortisol starts to rise, their adrenaline starts to rise, and they get ready to rather fight, flight, or freeze. They're the three responses. Fight or, everyone thinks it's just fight or flight, but there's actually a third one, which is freeze, right? And fight is a predator response. Flight is a prey response, and so is freeze. So freeze and flight are prey responses, right? And the animal will freeze. So the gazelle walking through the savannas, it freezes because it hears a rattling in the bush. Then all of a sudden, out like the peripheral vision of its mind, it sees a tiger start to emerge. And it's like, bodily sensations increase, it tenses up, it gets ready to bounce. And as soon as this tiger bounces out of the bush, this gazelle bang goes, and all this built up energy, all its cardiovascular systems, all the blood has been sent to its muscles and its heart, and it runs and it runs and it runs. And let's say this time it escapes the tiger. What happens then is that is a trauma. That is a traumatic experience that has happened to that animal. And it's carried that energy. It's just dealt with a really stressful emotional experience. But what you'll see is as it escapes the tiger and it knows it's free, you'll see the animal shake. Like literally, it will shake its body and shake its head, and it will do all these weird things. And it will shake the energy from the fight or flight response. It will shake out all the cortisol, the adrenaline. It will shake up all that built up energy, and it will shake it out its body. And then it will move on like nothing's happened. It won't recruit trauma like humans do, because it lets the sensations come through their body through movement. It feels them and it shakes them out. What happens with humans is, let's say if I don't really like to talk about these sort of things, but say someone gets like sexually abused. Let's say someone has a real traumatic experience. I don't know, they get in a car crash, or they see something that they shouldn't see. A lot of PTSD comes through this. Say if a soldier goes through this in the world, and they have something, they see someone's leg get blown off, or they have their own leg blown off. I don't know what happens, like something really traumatic. They get the fight or flight response. They fight, they flight, or they freeze. And what happens is, after that experience, once they're safe, they conceptualize that experience in their minds, and they create an idea around it. And what does that idea do? It suppresses the sensations in their body. So that build-up of energy that's come from that fight or flight or freeze response is wanting to come out. It's shaking. It wants to come out through movement. But because we create stories and narratives around it, we suppress the sensations, and they get built into our DNA. They get built into our body, and we don't feel them. So whereas that wild animal shakes the energy off, it shakes off the feeling of what it was like to escape that tiger, our traumatic responses, we create a narrative around them, we attach to them, and we suppress them deep in our body. And then they sit there as this real fear, this real deep fear or deep anger or deep resentment, whatever that feeling was from that fight or flight response, they sit in our body and they just never get the expression that it needs. And by coming into the body and feeling the sensations, we let go of the traumatic responses that are sitting deep in our body. And so in that sense, we need to be more like the wild animals. And the reason we do that is because humans have developed self-consciousness, which is the prefrontal cortex. So there's a part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is developed through evolution, which has created self-consciousness. It's created a sense of self, and it allows us to idealize and conceptualize things out in the world. And now, because we've developed that, there is a way that we can not feel what is uncomfortable. There's a way that we can try and understand everything instead of feeling it, and that puts it deeper into our body. But the animals don't have that. A gazelle out in the wild doesn't have a prefrontal cortex that's developed like ours. It doesn't have this ability to conceptualize and narrate and create metaphors and stories. It just feels the energy, and the energy leaves it. And that's why animals don't get trauma like what we get. Because they feel the energy, they feel the response, they feel it, they feel what it was like to have that fight or flight response, whereas we suppress it because it's uncomfortable to feel, and we have this ability to create narratives in our mind. And if you look at let's say the Adam and Eve story, this is really interesting, right? This is where self-consciousness emerges from. When you look at the Adam and Eve story, Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden with God. And there's this tree and there's this fruit. They're like, don't eat the apple, don't eat the fruit, right? And what happens is Adam and Eve are walking around, and at this point they're naked. They're walking around and they've got no self-consciousness. They've got no narration. They've got no shame or resent or anything. They are just they're animals at that point. How you see a dog just walk around and it doesn't care. It just does what it wants. It literally can cock its leg up and lick its balls in the middle of, I don't know, in the middle of a group of people and just not care. This is how humans were until we developed self-consciousness. We were just walking around, flowing through the world and just living out our impulses. And there's this tree of knowledge right here. There's this fruit that God said, do not eat, right? And what happens is a serpent comes, which is a snake, and is conceptualized or is a metaphorical idea for the devil. And it comes to Eve and it goes, eat the apple. And what happens is Eve takes a bite and then she develops self-consciousness. She suddenly becomes aware of, wow, I'm in this garden, I'm naked, and I'm this person, I'm insecure and I'm anxious, what is going on? She becomes aware of this, and she gets Adam to take a bite of the apple. And what that apple is the knowledge of good and evil. So that apple now has opened Adam and Eve up to the understanding, the conceptualization of morality and good and evil. And with that has become self-consciousness now, because they're aware that things are good and bad and they've got to make choices out in the world. Whereas animals don't have to make choices, they just react. Humans get this ability to make choices, but with that becomes this heavy sense of, whoa, it's hard. There is a lot, and anxiety and depression and all of these feelings arise from self-consciousness. And when God finally comes to them, he realizes that now they've been self-consciousness and they're scared to look at him and they don't want to be around him. And God realizes that they have the knowledge of good and evil. So he throws them out into the world. And what happens then is, as you go through the stories of Cain and Abel and the stories of Genesis, you start realizing that this knowledge of good and evil is compounding and growing. And this is what creates humans. It's why humans can do such negative things, is because we've got this innate morality built into us from this knowledge of good and evil. And then you see Cain and Abel, where Cain kills Abel and blah, 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 and it builds on and on. And we forget that we are these spiritual animals. We are these we're connected to God. And this remembrance of, wow, we are God we forget it, because we have this sense of self, this morality, this self-consciousness that tries to make us move in the world. And by coming into the body, by really feeling and getting into the divinity of what it is to be a human, you start remembering the divine the divine excellence of what you are. You are a divine being. You are truly like unique and special. And we are all connected to this source, this God of this Garden of Eden. We've all arrived from that. We've all arrived from the same thing. And whether you call God love or you call it the universal power, whatever it is, God is all of us. We are all part of that, and we have just forgot that. We've come from this place, this source of divinity. And because we've got this knowledge of good and evil, this self-consciousness, it's wiped us away from this divinity. Like we forget it. And by coming into the body, by feeling more, it's a form of spirituality because you're getting in touch with who you truly are. And we get lost in this narrative, these ideas, this ego really makes us forget that, wow, we are a part of God. We are a part of reality. And all of you, everyone listening, me included, everyone out there in the world, even the people that are negative and you don't like and the people that are causing wars in the world, we all come from this true divinity that is God. That is like, we come from the Garden of Eden. We've come from this divine form. I'm not saying that the Garden of Eden was real, by the way, but that is what the kind of metaphorical use for it is. Like, we've all come from divinity, and by coming into bodies and developing this prefrontal cortex and this narrative in our mind, it's created this knowledge of good and evil, which has created this form of dissociation. So by coming into the body, by really feeling what you need to feel, it's the way that you can get in touch with who you truly are. And you can overcome this trauma. I hope that was a good episode, people. Like, I feel like that went a lot smoother than the other episodes I recorded. As I said, I feel like that's a really good book to read for someone who's like kind of wants to get into somatic inquiry, or if you're dealing with like social anxiety or something, go and read Waking the Trauma by Peter Levine. He's also got another one called The Unspoken Voice, which is very good. I've got loads of books I've been reading at the moment. Where's another one? Oh, they're all the way over there. Yeah, like if you want any book recommendations or you want to start getting a deeper understanding, like give me a message and like actually spend time reading, because like reading books like this, I can't explain how much of an impact they have on your life. Like, you're understanding who you are and you're taking steps into like overcoming generational trauma, and you're doing spiritual work by reading stuff like this. And they're hard, and intellectually I struggle really like quite difficultly trying to understand the concepts in these books, because these are like geniuses. They're like smart people who understand these things. But yeah, man, it makes me tons better. Like, I love it. I'm so interested in it. How can you not be interested in this stuff? How can you be not interested in reading the nature of human existence? Like, it's what we are. Like, and anything that you read benefits you. It really does. And the more you sit with it and the more you in practice embody the knowledge that you require, the better your life gets. Like, it really does. It's crazy how a reading habit and a commitment to, right, I'm going to work through my trauma. I'm going to feel what I need to feel. I'm going to understand these intellectual conceptualizations of what is depth psychology, Jungian psychology, trauma psychology, whatever it is. The more you make a commitment to understand these things, the better your life gets. The more in touch, the more soulful you become. So it's worth it. I think everyone should get into it, boys. I really recommend it. But yeah, that's my little podcast done. I hope that was a good episode, people. I've just realised I've recorded this in 4K, so this is going to take me probably about 10 years to upload. So it's 40 gigabytes at the moment, which is a nightmare. But yeah, I hope I articulated myself well. I hope the episode came across like enthusiastic, because I really feel like this is the important work that I'm trying to do right now. And by me describing what I've been experiencing through this podcast, I feel like my knowledge and clarification of what I'm talking about is just tenfolded. And I feel motivated to go and read more. I feel motivated to go and like work on myself more. And this is what this podcast is for. So yes, people, thank you very much for listening. And I'll see you all in, I don't know, the next episode. I think I'm going to record an episode with my brother and just talk about the things we've gone through. So yeah, that should be a cool episode. But yeah, let me know if you've got certain topics you want to listen to. I don't know, maybe if it's just, it can just be stuff as simple as working out. I love talking about working out. I love talking about diet, nutrition, like sleep. So if you want to hear like an episode on that, let me know. If you want to hear an episode about meditation, if you want me to interview people, like you think someone is really interesting that you follow, I can try and reach out to them and get them on the podcast. So just let me know, people. I want to be a service for you. It's not all just about me, this podcast. So yeah, I'm just waffling for the sake of waffling now. So hope you have a good day, people. I hope everything goes well, and I'll see you all in the next episode.